has a better chance of winning their first Super Bowl ring? Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson? We'll debate on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, we are going to debate which quarterbacks have a better chance of getting their next Super Bowl championship. Aaron Rodgers, the old man, or the new cowboy, and Bo Nix. We're going to talk about Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, draft mates there. But we'll start with two heavy hitters in Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Before we get into it, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. And thanks for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, you guessed it, every day. Lauren, we got a bunch of news out of Buffalo recently, concerns with James Cook and, maybe the Khalil Shakir injury. And in Baltimore, things seem to be going swimmingly. They seem to be having a pretty good time. There are some whispers out there. Even Lamar Jackson could be getting a big deal done soon. That might even happen by the time you hear this. Who knows? But if you're looking at the Buffalo Bills, you're looking at the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and one of them had to get their Super Bowl championship, their first one this year. Who would you roll with?
The way you laid it out is funny because it feels like it's like that every year where it's like the Bills there's always a storyline about them struggling or the coaching staff's going to get fired or all this stuff. And yet we get to the AFC championship and it always feels like, well, probably going to be Buffalo more than Baltimore, despite Baltimore seeming to have better coaching staff and maybe more well-rounded roster. And yet there's something about Lamar Jackson's history and Josh Allen's playmaking that just feels like, well, even against logic, that still seems like somehow Buffalo will find a way to be a little bit farther ahead.
And it is a little bit against logic because you see the things that Lamar Jackson does. Obviously, Josh Allen won the MVP this year, but Lamar Jackson has multiple MVPs, and some would debate, some would say, some would argue that Lamar Jackson should have got this year's award. I'm not in that camp, but there's a large camp that says that about Lamar Jackson. So it is a bit strange because you see what Lamar Jackson can do and just the explosiveness that he provides. And there are some out there, and no surprise, our friends over at Locked On Ravens who think Lamar Jackson would be the number one pick ever at the quarterback position.
But I think if I was starting an offense with every player in the history of the National Football League available, Lamar Jackson would be my quarterback. I would want the quarterback that can do the most things at the highest level. And I think that's what John Harbaugh is saying. He is saying that Lamar Jackson is able to do anything you could ask a quarterback of, and he's able to do it at an extremely high level.
And that's true, but it hasn't quite happened in the playoffs. So I feel like when we're looking at this, it's like, are we betting on Lamar Jackson to finally play his best version of himself, that version of football? Are we betting on that to finally happen in the playoffs? Or are we going to bet that the rest of the Buffalo Bills actually step up in that defense that Buffalo is really relied on, that Sean McDermott is known for? Are they going to step up? And that's something that my guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills has been talking about recently as well.
When you have Josh Allen as your quarterback, you can make some choices in how you play defensively because you know you're going to be able to probably score some points. And so that's at its core what the Bills want to do. They don't want to play this Belichick style of defense where everyone's a fire hydrant up front and there's tanks against the run and you can out-athlete them up front. That's not what the Bills want to do. They want to play to create negative plays, put you in bad positions, take away the football. And Sean McDermott for the last 12 years has had a top 10 defense in taking away the football. And that's not just because they have Josh Allen and there's leads. That is the Bills without Josh Allen. That's Bills with Josh Allen before Josh Allen was Josh Allen.
But that hasn't happened in the playoffs when they need a big turnover, when they need to switch things around and get the ball back to Josh Allen. So it's like, do you bet on Lamar Jackson raising his level of play, or do you bet on the Buffalo supporting cast to finally step up?
Yeah, like it feels like if you picked up Lamar Jackson, if you traded them together, right? Traded one for one, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, hypothetically, like, and you put Josh Allen on the Ravens and Lamar Jackson on the Bills, like we would universally take the Ravens there, right? With Josh Allen in theory, because of everything. Like it feels like he's done more to elevate the level of play of the players in Buffalo than Lamar has done in Baltimore. And so I don't know, it ends up feeling to me like it's such a quarterback driven thing that like if at the end of the day Allen is the one who's been able to elevate, then I count on him to be the one to continue to elevate while we still kind of wait for Lamar Jackson to be able to put him over the top.
Yeah, I've seen Josh Allen play at his highest heights in the playoffs, and we haven't necessarily seen that from Lamar. So if I have to, kind of bet on the quarterback, I'm going to bet on Josh Allen. Now, the other parts of the roster are where things obviously become the conversation. Who do you count on more, the supporting cast from the Baltimore Ravens or the supporting cast from the Buffalo Bills? And I think it would be fair to say the Baltimore Ravens, but I think the Buffalo Bills probably have a better offensive line. Right now, it's the weapons for the Bills that we question so much, because I think Zay Flowers would be the best weapon on the Bills right now. And they add in DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe he's not quite the DeAndre Hopkins of before, but Derrick Henry, obviously a better player than James Cook, although James Cook, a very good player. And the defensive weapons, I count on more on Baltimore's side, like a guy like, obviously, Kyle Hamilton, and you have Roquan Smith in the middle of the defense. So I think I do, if you put Josh Allen on the Ravens, I think I would like that team better than Lamar Jackson on the Buffalo Bills, which leans me towards, unfortunately, having to go with the Bills because I trust Josh Allen more.
Yeah, it's so kind of confounding because like the Ravens have, like we just talked about, a slightly better supporting cast if you want to nitpick it.
Yes.
They have the coaching staff that you would prefer. And like,
yes,
talent-wise, Lamar Jackson, like we heard in the Locked On Ravens clip, like he should be the most special talent at the quarterback position. So then it feels like, well, is Lamar Jackson the problem? He's a 2-time MVP who dominates the regular season. So it's like, it just doesn't, it's like something's missing. It just doesn't quite add up in a way that feels satisfying. Like there's got to be, there's more here that we just can't really measure when it comes to like why it's not working for him in the playoffs when he's so great the rest of the time and everything else should be better too. And yet somehow Josh Allen turns it up in a way that Lamar just can't or hasn't. Hasn't yet. Yeah. Can't.
It's still, waiting to be written, but hasn't so far. And that's why when we talked about their matchup in the playoffs last year, I was like, this is way bigger for Lamar's legacy. Although both legacies are on the line, Lamar just has not played his best in the playoffs. So to not only win, but to play great on the way there, it would do so much for Lamar to win the Super Bowl. I think he is the player in the NFL. I know it sounds crazy because he's so good already, but if he were to get that Super Bowl, it's not just like, oh, now he's got a ring. It totally flips a narrative about him that'll be used against him. You know what I mean? So it slays his greatest enemy while also creating his greatest achievement. So to me, going into the season, Lamar Jackson is the number one guy who could benefit the most legacy-wise. Like he becomes all time, if he's able to get one Super Bowl championship that just validates how great of a talent he is. And I don't know that Josh Allen needs that as much because of the 13 seconds incident with the Chiefs and stuff like that. It's like he's played his best and his team has let him down. But when Lamar's team hasn't reached their heights, it's been maybe Lamar who's made the mistakes that have kind of put them in bad positions. So it's just different in that way.
Yeah, I agree 100% about a Super Bowl changing the narrative for Lamar. But I do wonder, like, does the narrative change from this guy can't win the one big one to, wow, he only won one? Like, does it become the Aaron Rodgers narrative? Like, because he's the next player I thought of that, like, if he won a second ring, that would be a really big thing for his legacy because everyone looks and goes, how did Aaron Rodgers only win one Super Bowl? Like, it really, he should have won more than one. And I wonder if Lamar's young enough where if he wins one now, will that narrative then a few years down the line go from, well, why hasn't Lamar won two? Like, if he's going to be this MVP all-time great quarterback, he should be a multi-Super Bowl winner with a head coach like John Harbaugh that's been a Super Bowl winner. Like, I wonder if we just sort of move the goalpost on him after that.
So, I think that's a fair question. Like, hey, would they just, and I'm sure that, anywhere you can lift up a rock on the internet and find someone saying something about something, like you can find what you need, but I think it's further enough along into Lamar Jackson's career now to where it wouldn't be like it's not like, oh, he's got so much career left, he's got to win another one. Like, it's been long enough into the career now that I think that might not creep in, but I'm sure you'd find it somewhere. But it's interesting you mentioned Aaron Rodgers because I think you're right. A Super Bowl for his legacy would be insane right now. And we're going to talk Aaron Rodgers the old man versus the new cowboy on the scene in Bo Nix. But first, we go to the same draft class. We go back to, 2021, 2020, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, because both of those teams are very, very different. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. The best time of year is back, folks. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before this year. Me and I believe Lauren as well are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. Yahoo's been doing this for years, folks. They have the best draft day setup. They have the best features. It's easy to use, a great app as well. Again, they've been doing it for 28 years, and to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We're looking at quarterbacks and who we think has a better chance to win the Super Bowl. We both kind of had a weird response in the first segment where we believed in the Ravens supporting cast more, but believed in Josh Allen a little bit more as a quarterback. It makes it difficult, but it's only going to get more difficult, Lauren, because now I want to look at Joe Burrow's Cincinnati Bengals against Justin Herbert's Los Angeles Chargers. Obviously, massive offensive talent for the Bengals, even though some question marks on the offensive line, like always with the Cincinnati Bengals. But a defense that there are question marks, but we kind of know the answers to those questions, and they're not great answers. You look at the Chargers, on the other hand, though. They have a team with a lot of talent, really stacked offensive line, but questionable weapons that have only gotten more questionable over the last few weeks. A defense with some talent, but not quite the star power at certain positions like you would hope for with the Chargers of recent years and see in recent years. So it makes it interesting. The Bengals much more boom or bust. The Chargers much more reliable. But when we talk about making a Super Bowl run, we've seen the Bengals do that before. So if you had to make a bet or you had to pick, who do you think has a better chance of winning the Super Bowl this year? Burrow's Bengals or Herbert's Chargers?
For me, I go Chargers because of the Jim Harbaugh effect of someone who has such a consistent track record of winning that, yeah, we've seen the Bengals do the one big run, and I don't want to take anything away from that, but it was kind of a flash in the pan, and it's been a lot of struggle since. And I never like a team where that's a good couple of weeks into training camp with still not knowing what your pass rushers are going to look like, and there's a lot of the big question marks about that defense and the offensive line. Like, those are kind of the two areas that feel the most important there. Like, your elite quarterback can make up for weapons that might be struggling or a run game that might be struggling, but like O-line and pass rush are like things that are a little bit harder for Joe Burrow to just elevate and overcome. And so to me, like, as much as I trust Burrow the quarterback more than Herbert the quarterback, I trust the coaching and the roster building in Los Angeles just enough to say, like, Harbaugh is going to get this team consistently good and in that mix. Whereas the Bengals, you can kind of flip a coin and they're either going to be a division winner or a top 15 draft pick.
See, that's my problem is I feel pretty solid that the Chargers are going to make the playoffs. Like, and if you make the tournament, who knows what can happen? We're talking about making a Super Bowl run here. It's not like both teams are guaranteed to make the playoffs and then I make my pick of who I think will make it through. Like, a team's got to make it there and the Bengals haven't. But the problem is when we get into the playoffs and when we get into critical games, it goes back to I just don't know that I can trust Justin Herbert, and I have seen Burrow in the biggest moments mostly be able to deliver. If he had just a split second more, he's throwing a wide open Jamar Chase a touchdown pass before Aaron Donald gets to him at the very end of that Super Bowl. Like, it was right there, it was open, and they had it. All right, and Aaron Donald made a special play because he is one of the greatest players of all time. But you look at Herbert, and he just hasn't been as clutch in the big moments. And it's interesting that Warren Sharp from Sharp Football Analysis recently went on Locked On Chargers and broke down some of those numbers.
Yeah, in the book, you were very adamant that Justin Herbert had to play better later in games. Per the football preview, the fourth quarter of one-score games last year, Justin Herbert ranked 25th in accuracy and 23rd in success rate. If the Chargers want to take that next step in 2025, it is important that Justin Herbert finds a way to elevate his game later in games. Would you say that would be accurate?
Yeah, this was one thing that I was surprised by, and I don't know if you guys, as obviously hardcore fans, or the audience is probably hardcore fans, are aware of, but in the fourth quarter of games, Justin Herbert has struggled. Now, you guys went 0-2 in games decided by a field goal last year, 0-5 in 2023, so you've struggled from a win-loss perspective. You're 6-13 under Justin Herbert as your quarterback, which is the second worst mark in the NFL over the last 4 years in games decided by a field goal. And so you could say, well, that's quarterback wins. Who cares about quarterback wins? That's not really a stat. But what drives wins when a quarterback is playing is what his performance is. So let's look at his performance metrics in the fourth quarter of these close games. And you already mentioned some of them, but in one-score games, in the fourth quarter, I don't think a lot of you fans out there probably are aware that Justin Herbert, out of 35 qualifying quarterbacks with 100-plus attempts in this time period, last 4 years, Justin Herbert ranks 25th out of 35 in accuracy. You just mentioned 23rd in success rate, 20th in yards per attempt, 11th in EPA, 20th in interception rate, and 28th in sacks taken per pressure. So he struggled. And even if you just want to say, forget before Jim Harbaugh, let's focus on Harbaugh with Greg Roman. He struggled a lot last year in these close game situations.
I think there's always like a weird feeling with Justin Herbert where it's like, man, this guy's really good. And you watch him and you're like, this guy's really good. And you can't quite put your finger on why isn't he a certified, the number 5 quarterback? Why isn't he a guy who everyone is unanimous on? This guy's great. And it's because his biggest failures come in the biggest moments. And I think it sticks with people. So Warren Sharp does good work with the data and stuff. And he did a really good job of quantifying that there. And I guess even when I was listening to the show, I was like, man, that's a great point. That is the Herbert problem. So now it's like, the thing that's holding Herbert back is kind of that clutch gene, those clutch moments. And I know Burrow has that in spades, so I trust the Chargers more to get there. But when it comes to high-end upside to actually get it done, I'm actually going to go with the Bengals, who I trust more, just because I think they have the gumption to do it if they can make it there.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you can kind of feel like that association, like, is this just a Chargers thing or is it a Justin Herbert thing? And I think
it goes beyond him too, right?
Well, but I think Jim Harbaugh will be the ultimate sort of differentiator there. Is like, now you've got some grown-ups in the coaching room. So like, in theory, the Chargers should stop chargering. But if Herbert doesn't stop Herberting, then you'll know it's not and then you'll know it's not just like, well, Quentin Johnson dropped the pass and that, that's how the Chargers messed up, or J.K. Dobbins fumbled and that's how they messed up. Like, eventually it'll sort of weed itself out there and say, no, this has just got to be a Justin Herbert thing. But I will say, at least when it comes to the playoffs, he's a much smaller sample size. I know the fourth quarter end game situation is not very, very real, but like when I think about Lamar Jackson and how he hasn't been big in the playoffs, Justin Herbert's had 2 playoff games. He wasn't great in either one, but like Lamar's played in 8, and we kind of have the sample size to say, hey, it's a little bit more of a consistent thing. Herbert, I still feel like maybe in the postseason, we still haven't gotten enough chance to see, like, can he turn it up in those moments, even if he hasn't in the regular season late game.
And I think the argument would still be that when Herbert has had those opportunities, obviously last year, not a great performance, but all his previous opportunities prior to last year that he's being judged on were with, rough coaching, certain circumstances. So, you could go through any quarterback and make all these excuses and do it. Herbert's got a good enough team now, and I agree with you that Jim Harbaugh should be a stabling force for him to kind of show really who he is. But right now, he hasn't. So he's got to go out there and do it. I think they have a really good team. The weapons, inconsistent. But with that offensive line, if I had to choose in the NFL nowadays, I'd go with a great offensive line over great weapons because it's just so rare to have a good offensive line. So I think Herbert has enough that, after this year, we can kind of be like, he's had Harbaugh year 2. He's got a good offensive line in front of him. They have a pretty good team. They made the playoffs last year. Like, it's time to get it done, Justin Herbert. And if you're that top 5 guy, we'll see it.
But then is the next scapegoat then Greg Roman though? Like if they're struggling, it's
that's where it's going.
That's what it feels like. It's like, well, they're conservative, run the ball offense. Like, are they scheming up these weapons well enough for Justin Herbert? Like, there's always another domino somewhere that can fall.
Yeah, it's like the Ravens thing before they made changes. Is it that he doesn't have enough weapons? Or is it that they don't have enough weapons because this is the style that they actually want to play? And it's a philosophical thing that the weapons are what they are. That's the next step on the Justin Herbert train. You're right about that. But with that being said, we're going to stay in the AFC West with one of the teams and stay in the AFC North. So look at that, back to back. But we got the old cowboy, Aaron Rodgers, against the new gunslinger in Bo Nix. Both teams have talent, but which quarterback do you think can drive their team to a championship? Can't wait to talk about that one. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. For me, I was kind of surprised by how much money I was spending on online shopping. Monarch was able to kind of make that visible to me so I could change some of my habits. Plus, I've been getting into investing. So again, tracking everything all in one place, super, super efficient, super, super easy. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, Lauren, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We're looking at which team has a better chance to win a Super Bowl. We talked about the top tier with the Ravens and the Bills. We talked about that mid-tier with Joe Burrow's Bengals and Justin Herbert's Chargers. Now I want to go to, the lower tier of expected playoff teams in the AFC, although the Broncos could make an argument to not be in that tier. I don't think the Steelers can do much right now to get them out of that tier, at least from the public perception. But before we dive in, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rodgers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. But I think if you're looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Denver Broncos are obviously the better team right now. They looked better last year. I mean, both kind of got to a similar spot, but, they look like a team on the rise. Where the Steelers feel somewhat like fool's gold. It's like we know they're the Steelers. They're good, but the Steelers always get a little bit overrated every year. But I got to tell you, I've been higher on the Steelers if they got Aaron Rodgers throughout the process. I am high on the Steelers, and I know I've been low on the Broncos, but I'm going to go with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to trust the old cowboy and Aaron Rodgers and the reliable star talent that the Pittsburgh Steelers can offer with Jalen Ramsey, TJ Watt, DK Metcalf. I just trust the stars in Pittsburgh more than I trust the sum of the parts of the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, it feels like it sticks with our theme where it's like this. The Broncos are kind of the high variance boom or bust team, and the Steelers are a little bit more like the solid, steady, what you're going to get every single week and every single year.
Right, right.
I think you could see the Denver Broncos, everything lying there, but I'm always weary of Denver right now, and any of these teams. It feels like they overachieved a little bit last season.
Yes,
we just assume then they're going to get better the following year. But it's like if they overachieve the first year, I think there's room for them to either fall back down a little bit or just kind of stay a little bit more where they are. As we assume everyone's going to get better, but you could see a quarterback in year two having defenses with a full year of tape on him, maybe adjust to Bo Nix a little bit more and slow some things down. And we do see generally in the NFL it's very hard to consistently have a top three defense year to year to year. You're always going to have some kind of drop off. That's one of the more consistent things is that defenses don't remain in the top three. So I think where they were with Vance Joseph last year, they're going to still be a good defense, but maybe not quite as good. And so I just think there's room for Denver to come down a little bit more. And so Mike Tomlin having been a Super Bowl coach, Aaron Rodgers having been a Super Bowl quarterback, if anybody could kind of pull that all together, it feels like it's those two, but we're talking the lowest tier for a reason. I'm not super confident in either side there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're not talking about teams that are favorites to do it, but if one of them had to do it, yeah, I believe in the consistency of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then if both teams were to get to the playoffs, I'm always going to side with the team with more star talent. I think that is where I come down to is who can I count on? If I have to, make a prediction, make a bet, if you're asking me this or that question, I'm going to go with what I can count on. And I can count on the Pittsburgh Steelers consistency, and I can count on the star players that Pittsburgh has. And look, the Broncos have some great players. I mean, Cortland Sutton's awesome. They have the really, really good offensive line. They obviously have Pat Surtain, Nick Bonito, I think is a super underrated player in the NFL. We just saw Zach Allen get a huge deal from the Broncos. A lot of defensive line contracts being signed here in the last couple of weeks, big names, mid names, everything in between. So I guess I count on that star power, and the defense so far in training camp for the Steelers has been as advertised, according to Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers.
The defense is still dominating the practices. And again, this was to be expected, especially with the investments they've made on this defense, especially with all the changes that the offense is going through. But man, this defense continues to look sharp even when they're sitting guys out. I broke this down throughout the weekend, but even when Joey Porter Jr. was out, they were still rocking with Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey on the outside, and Brandon Echols filled it on the inside. They moved guys around. Darius Slay played very well. A lot of the guys on the defense just making plays left and right. But the thing that I think is really coming together about this defense is that these new defensive linemen they've added, both the rookies and the free agent additions, they're making a difference, and they look nasty.
So, I mean, the Broncos defense was locked down last year, and it led to a lot of their close victories. But I think the Steelers defense can be that good this year, and I believe in that a little bit more. So I go with the Steelers.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is like, you can see where the Pittsburgh Steelers can be better this season. TJ Watt will be healthier. Like, they can have a bounce back group for that on defense improve. And then, of course, you hope that if you're a Steelers fan, you hope that Rodgers elevates the offense and the new weapons and everything. And I look at Denver, and it's more like, you're just counting on young players taking another step forward. Bo Nix being a little bit better. Cortland Sutton taking a step forward. The offense, but like, it's not as though there's like this super obvious path. It's just like player development. And generally, like, not every young player is going to get a big leap forward. Maybe they might not go backwards, but they just might not take that big step forward that you're counting on. So maybe a couple of them will, but then some of them won't. And it's harder to see that, like, that path of everything lining up for them to go all the way to the big game.
Look, I'll tell you, start looking at the AFC. You want to make your playoff predictions? It is difficult. It is, honestly, I think the NFC is really difficult as well, especially with the wild card group. But man, the AFC is going to be a bloodbath, especially there in the AFC West. But that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, Lauren Cox, as we tell you every single episode. Thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.